Hello, everyone, and yes, welcome to the DYA Network that we call Network Nation. And again, I'm your host, David Edwards. And today, everyone, I'm excited, but those who listen know I'm excited every week, right? Because today, our guest, we're going to explore the topic of what it means to be a student athlete and how to develop strategies for success. Our guest has experience in this area, being a former student athlete, as well as a best-selling author, two-time TEDx speaker, and host of Beyond the Ball podcast. He has been featured on CBS News and has been guest speaker to several universities, including University of Connecticut, Vanderbilt, and the University of Texas. His skill set has allowed him to conduct workshops on leadership, motivation, and team building. Let's give a warm Network Nation welcome to our guest today, Jonathan Jones. Jonathan, welcome to Network Nation today.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me, David. I'm glad to be here.
Always, everyone knows I start with the backstory. Let's go back to you as a little boy. I did hear your TEDx and know a little bit about the fire engine. I'm going to address that in a little bit. What did you like to do growing up for fun? What kind of activities did you get involved with?
So for growing up, the activities that were the most fun ultimately was following my older brother around. And
Okay.
I typically would follow him, and it would look like basketball. It would look like a little bit of baseball. But in addition to those things, I used to watch TV, and Pokemon was a thing. Pokemon was real big at that time. So playing the video games and, just following behind my older brother.
Okay. And then I know your spirit, you played basketball in high school, went on to play some college ball. But during that timeline, let's go back, everyone. I want to kind of touch base on this fire engine. So you spoke to TEDx. See the TEDx, everyone. It's a great speech that you do with a lot of young adults, youth. But talk about that fire engine. How did that impact you thinking about ideas growing up and your parents involved with you to let you kind of explore in those areas?
So growing up, my mother and my father both have been truly monumental in my development, and they always told us that we can be what we wanted to be. We can ultimately accomplish what we wanted to accomplish. In the neighborhood that we stayed in growing up, there was always a lot of fire sirens going off. It just woo woo woo. We always heard the sirens go off, and then some of the shows I saw on TV. So hearing that constantly, so being exposed to that noise and that sound, then I wanted to find out more about it. Then I wanted to see what it would take to be a fireman. But ultimately, David, as I later realized that the requirements to be a fireman was something that I wasn't necessarily interested in, but I had to learn that through research, and also I ended up learning that through hearing more about it and just being further exposed to different experiences.
And see, that's great. You hit the key component there, the parents and the foundation. I'm going to come back to that a little bit later. But as far as mentors, it's important we have mentors. We'll get into that. Everyone knows I'm about that. Other than your parents, along your journey, were there any other mentors to where you are today?
In regards to mentors, one gentleman that always comes to mind is Dr. Daniel Prescott, because
Okay.
he was the individual who saw me when I was right around that middle school age, and then I would check in with him over time, so middle school, high school, and then he was the one to give me my first opportunity to work for him after I graduated from college. So he was the individual who put me in uncomfortable situations all the time, and ultimately this grew me in areas that I didn't even know I had muscles to grow. So from going there as a middle school student and volunteering, doing Thanksgiving give backs and Christmas bike giveaways, and then getting older and seeing the behind the scenes of what took place in that organization, then this is what really helped cultivate and really built my character outside of my mom and dad. And then even in addition to that, then my basketball coaches, of course, had hands in helping me develop. But Dr. Daniel Prescott, I would give him a lot of credit for really developing me and cultivating me in that way.
And you played high school basketball, went on to play college ball as well, correct?
Yes, sir. I played JV in high school. I did not play
Okay.
varsity
That's
because
okay.
the varsity team was number one in the nation according to USA Today in high school. So we had some grown men on that team. That did not happen for me.
But you went on, and then you had an injury too, didn't you? From playing in college, was it shin splints? Was it
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. So I had a cracked tibula. I believe that's the one in the front. That was
tibia?
cracked.
The tibia,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, yeah. The tibia. I had
Mhm.
my tibia was cracked, so I was forced to walk around with a boot, and I had that experience, which was Not the most fun. It was not the most fun, but it really gave me an opportunity just to further see and identify myself as something other than an athlete. So identifying
Mm.
other areas that I enjoyed outside of my sport at that time.
And see, this is all lining up with student athlete. This is what I really want to do. You always hear it, just like we hear all the time, sports and life and athlete and student. It becomes cliche. You know, I'm older, probably your parents' age, and being from that older era, I see it a lot now with media, right? I see it a lot in social media. But do we really understand what is your definition of a student athlete?
Mm. Wow, that's a great question. My definition of student athlete really is an individual who is stretched in more ways than that seem. Because a student athlete, they have a lot of pressure to perform on the athletic side, and then in
Mm-hmm.
addition to that, then there's the aspect of responsibility, leadership, and just the individual who on the other side still has to get it done academically. So my definition is an individual who's multifaceted and ultimately who really is molded in a way
Mm-hmm.
that sometimes, David, they might not even understand how powerful they are if they don't understand where some of the pieces and some of the strategies and some of the skills they've learned. If they don't know where to plug those things, then sometimes they might not be able to truly understand their value.
And so this is what the question I asked is that you're dealing, and I read 7 ways you can effectively support student athlete. This is postgraduate. So we're talking college level. But
Mm-hmm.
when we start looking at a student athlete, as we mature, we evolve, we change, right? A flower
Certainly.
buds and it changes from what it was when it was first a seed. And so when I look at a student athlete from the different tier levels, high
Mm.
school, junior high, what's the difference? Because I look back when I was young, and we heard the term back 1,000 years ago, playing, being a college athlete and playing sports just in general all of my life, even athletes we dealt with. I don't think we really look at it from the perspective of what it is, right? We hear it, okay, I'm a
Mm.
student athlete, right? Heard it all the way from the time I was in fourth grade. You're playing sports, and that time it wasn't, we didn't have travel, or now it's club sports. But what do you see a difference when you look at the collegiate athlete that's 21
Mm-hmm.
years old, mature, high school
Mm-hmm.
17, 18, and let's go junior high? What do you see a difference in the interpretation of an athlete those levels?
So starting, if we go back, starting like elementary school, middle school, it's for the love of the game, for the
Right.
pure love of the game. And I know you can recall this, David. Like you want to play basketball or football or soccer or gymnastics, whatever it is, you want to do it sun up to sundown. That's all that matters. It's just fun. Then we get to the high school level. Now we see things are getting more serious. Now it's just not going to open gym or just not just playing the sport, but now we have to lift the weights because we need to strengthen our body to be able to take on the wear and tear. We also have to understand that wins and losses matter ultimately for us being able to achieve, winning the nationals or the state title. But then when we go to
Mm-hmm.
college, now in college, I'm looking at an athlete now as a business owner or an entrepreneur, especially with this name, image, and likeness thing coming out. Because now, when you're talking college and you're looking at coaches getting paid 6 figures, 7 figures to coach these individuals, and if they win a certain amount of games or if they lose a certain amount of games, then their family is moving to another location or to another job.
Yeah.
You have to understand that this individual now is not just somebody who can play for fun, but now you're like people's livelihoods are dependent upon this individual. So now stress is increased, what's required is increased, and you're just put in a tough situation now to perform at the highest of levels consistently.
Yeah, and I look
Consistently.
back when I played, and it was a job. When you look at college, you're paying for your education, and from that standpoint, there was a commitment you had to make because financially you were there. You one of these athletes that we're paying for. You will be at study table. You will be here. You will do these training sessions. And what I want to get at from that standpoint with you is this: what are some of the things that you see, the flags, when you look at the athletes coming out that you work with? Is there a trend? What are certain things? I heard a podcast you talked about. It was mental health, career readiness, and life skills. Right, and life skills is broad. I mean, we can. It's subjective to a certain degree. We can go down any road with the life skills. But out of those things coming out of college, what do you see that stands out the most?
Coming out of college, I would say that the cultivation of the identity. An individual really needs to know and identify what you're passionate about, what you even like doing, what do you enjoy doing. If your sport was gone tomorrow, what would you enjoy doing? Or what could you even potentially see yourself doing for a career? So I think that's one of the areas that I really encourage these
Hmm.
student athletes to find something that you enjoy doing. What type of books do you like reading? What type of podcasts do you like listening to? Because ultimately these things now with being in 2021, these things can help mentor us from a distance, right? So with
Hmm.
YouTube and all the things we're taking in, so I would say the identity piece is just major. And then even outside of that, then just thinking about what skills have you had working or playing your sport ultimately that could be monetized, because
Mm.
just like you were talking about, David, with life skills, it is very general. But if we really think about some of the things that we've learned through the time of us playing our sport, we think about showing up on time, we think about discipline, we thinking about being a team captain, which means you have the ability to bring people together and communicate with different individuals of different personality types. These are things that we have to begin to factor in and truly assess the value of those. And then, I mean, lastly, mental health, certainly mental health, knowing what triggers you, knowing what upsets you, and knowing what makes you happy. When are you joyful? And
Hmm.
when we able to identify these things, now that allows us to make sure that we're in healthy relationships. And if we're in healthy relationships, we can identify the type of environment, or the environment and work environments we need to be in to truly thrive and truly be successful on all levels.
And that is, I agree with you 100%. And when I look back younger, my father was in education and coach. He was my track coach in high school and football coach. And what's interesting was I went back to help him with the track program later. When I got out of college, I was traveling with business doing, I didn't have a lot of time. He said, "Can you come help me with the program?" And the reason was at the time I was 30, right? He said, and what
Mm.
I realized after my father passed 2 years ago was the seeds that planted that athletes came forward, how it impacted their lives with their journey beyond the student athlete of college. There's
Mm.
kids right now, young men, that approached me after his eulogy. I was getting messages from across the country. I've talked about this on the podcast, but how we had an impact on their life by leading by example, giving
Mm.
them exposure. You said it yourself. And where I'm going is at the college level is great, but those are things, don't you think we should identify when they're younger? Because a point you made was this: the foundation is what we build off of. And one of the things
Mm.
I think that is important that athletes have come to me is giving exposure. My second interview I had was with my godson, Chris Miller. Chris Miller could play basketball, wanted to go to the NBA. I used to take him to areas to see things he never saw before. Chris would
Mm.
say, "Wait a minute, they're not in the NBA. He's living like this. They're traveling like this." And it opened his
Mm.
eyes. You have to listen to that interview. And I think it's highly imperative that our identity starts young. When the seed is starting to grow, we have to evolve it there. So when you start looking back at the younger age with your expertise and experience, what's some key things? What would you say at that younger age that needs to be cultivated before I get to college? And now I'm trying to understand this, and entrepreneurship should start in high school. My daughter
Mm.
is a freshman in college right now. My one is a senior. They're both involved with the business. My youngest is getting her ACE certification. She's doing consulting already. My oldest is going into, she's doing um, Chantel is going into, I should know it, right? It's design engineer, architectural design engineering. She's designing a
Mm.
facility for us. And I said,
Wow.
why don't you start a website and start consulting there? And the reason I'm bringing this, I won't get long with it. I'm gonna let you talk. But I think success leaves clues. I said this before to Tony Robbins. I don't want to keep giving him credit for certain things. But I think at an early age, everybody, especially you're an athlete, and at these college levels, man, come on, there. Some of these coaches are making 6, 10 million a year, and these colleges have these big alum. You have to reverse the script and utilize those programs. And we've had some top level athletes on here that play for them, the exposure you have, but you can start that branding process in high school, right? And so kind of tell me that, what would you, at the younger level, what would you say?
So just to your same point, David, just the idea of getting experiences. Because if I look back over my life, my mother and father, they put me in position to work with other people. They put me in position to have opportunities to give back and to serve, and they put me in, involve me with when we're going around and we're selling the candy for school. So we did that. And now as I'm sitting there telling this to you, then there's a point in my mind where I said, well, wait a minute, if I go to the store and I want to buy the blue raspberry blow pops and it's
Hmm.
$3 for a bag, and if I sell just enough to make that money, I can buy more and then I can enjoy eating more candy. So that was my first introduction to my own entrepreneurship experience. But going back to what you're saying, like my mother took me to plays, and she had us reading during the summer, and we would go ice skating, and there was just so many different instances to where my parents put me in position to get me in different places and different spaces to think differently. And that's the thing, just like what you were saying. I think that now we think we may think, and I'm gonna say this is broad and this is general. I know it's dangerous. I know it is. I know it
That's
is.
okay. We go there in Network Nation. Go ahead.
And understanding that yes, that there is a young individual who might be gifted athletically, but let's take a step back and really think about where else could they be gifted. If they're gifted athletically, that's where their heart is, that's what they're going to do, and they're going to enjoy doing that. But let's take 15 minutes, let's take 30 minutes a day, like let's see what else they might be interested in, because that's the time to introduce them to other experiences, because then they can try it on for 2 weeks, 3 weeks, say I don't think I necessarily like this or like that, and then they can move on and we can introduce them to something else. But either way, this is another experience that once they get to college and they have resources and they have alumni, then they can get connected with these individuals and then really have a fruitful conversation and see how they can move things forward. Just to your point.
Well, you bringing this up, it kind of touches base on something. Is that this is something we've done before. I had an athlete. Their junior college team made it to the Final Four 2 years ago in Chicago. He's a junior
Mm,
in college now, and he worked with our organization, some things that we had done, and he came home. And I, he's not look NBA. Is he going NBA? Let's be honest with you, everyone. We have to have a true assessment. So I asked him a question: what do you want to be? What do you want to do? I think
mm,
sometimes with athletes, is we coaches, we can. I'm on the fence with this too. What I'm about to say. Sometimes we are the worst enemy because we'll take
mm,
athletes and we take them through a process, and we don't even realize if I put it on a scale, athlete is here, student is here, and we see it at the
mm.
big programs. That's why a lot of these 5-star athletes are going into this transfer portal in college football.
Yeah.
It's the open draft. And the reason they're doing it is it's not necessarily for, don't get me wrong, some are, but understand it's big business. And I don't blame them because the bottom line is they're looking at that window of opportunity. But back younger, what I'm talking about, I mentioned to him, what do you want to do? I don't know academically. I said, what do you love to do? For athletes, there's so many different
Mm,
areas you can go into. What I'm doing now as a former athlete, I love
mm-hmm.
to do. I do consulting work. My background, I deal with physical therapy, movement assessments. We look at how we can look at injury prevention. You can go into orthopedics. You could be finances, managing money. Everybody start
Mm-hmm.
thinking outside the box here, okay? Doesn't mean your career is over. Look at what you're doing now. Now that your story, because I believe when you came out of college, I saw a little bit about you, is that when you came out of college, you experimented to find out your direction. Now you're doing something that you love to do. Am I right?
Mm-hmm. This is correct. This is
Right.
correct.
But and the thing is this: when we get out of college, this is a problem. This is why I told you I could go on a long time with this, and I won't talk long on this. But this is one thing that really rubs me is that we automatically assume as soon as we get out of college, we know all the answers. That's not the case.
Mm,
It's a buffet. You need to explore. I didn't start in this. My background is business. I went back to school and got an additional degree. I just finished additional certifications. So I'm certified and qualified. So it's not questioned with what we do. And so is
mm,
everyone in our organization. At my age, look how long it took everyone. But as an athlete, what we have to change coming out of school is to say, there's a show on Netflix that was called Last Chance University. Did you see that?
yes, I did.
Then you know
Yes,
what
sir.
I'm talking about. I've talked about on the show is that they feel that I didn't make it here. So my mentality is I'm not academically, I give up. So I think it's accountability on coaches, because you said that you had a mentor that was in education and coaching. At the
Mm-hmm.
younger level, coaches, we need to be held accountable. We need to be held accountable beyond the athletic end of it, but also look at it, not just are you meeting the grades, but my father brought me back to who are you? He's not in the pros. What do you do for a living? And next, I know I've had kids approaching me that I used to coach, and they're doing similar things I'm doing. And it excites me. It makes me feel good. That's fulfillment. So I'm not going to go too long. I go down the rabbit hole with it. So I wanted you kind of touch base on this for me. You talked in your book about what it really means to be educated. Now, that's your
Mm-hmm.
other book. That was in the process, 14 Surprisingly Simple Behaviors. What
Yes,
does it
sir.
mean to be educated? That's an excellent question. Because a lot of people, they don't look at it from a different way. I want you to talk about that for us.
Being educated is something that has even evolved for me since I initially wrote that book, David. And I'm glad you actually asked that. So ultimately, the traditional form of education, we know you go to school, you read the book they tell you to read, you take the test, and then sometimes we just forget that information. But now, the way I'm viewing education is to become a lifelong learner. And
Mm-hmm.
I'm not saying go, just go extremely deep in every subject and every subject matter. But I think when you find a certain area that you're extremely passionate about and you're wanting to know more, for instance, for me with now here lately student athlete development, David, I've done more research around student athlete development and identity foreclosure than I probably would have even done in a master's program. And
Mm-hmm.
now I'm like, I need to go back and just get my master's because it's gotten to the point to where I love looking at this research. But at the same time, when I was a square peg trying to push myself in a circle hole when I was going through graduate school to get my counseling degree, it wasn't working out because I wasn't as passionate about that and I was trying to get it for the wrong reason. But I want people to understand that being educated looks different for each individual. First of all, we have to understand that some of us learn differently. Some learn by video, some might learn by audio, some might learn by actually just reading physical books. So we have to identify how we best learn and then we digest information in that way. And that's really what I just encourage whoever out there is listening. If you grow best by listening to podcasts, listen to podcasts. Just because somebody suggests this was the best way for them doesn't necessarily mean that's going to be the best fit for you.
But you said something that is awesome, that it never stops. The professional development in, and that's
Mm-hmm.
something that to cultivate and learn. And everyone thinks because you can have a doctorate, but that doesn't mean that you're qualified yet to that high degree. Right? There's a
Mm.
lot of people that have the degree, but the experience, you need still mentorship and cultivating in those areas. And there's a lot of professionals out there that constantly we continue to take courses. We continue to hone in on our skills. And that's something that is awesome. What you're doing there is because you're kind of in the middle of that journey that they can see as a testimony. So that's awesome.
Definitely, definitely. Understanding just like you said, being a lifelong learner and just making sure that you're updated with what's going on in your industry and in your space. That's one of the
Right.
things I've really had to learn because at the end of the day, with high school, with college, and even with middle school, each of those there's like a 3 year to 4 year span or turnover. So ultimately, after that group leaves, you have to see what the next group is on. What's the trend? What's currently buzzing? What are they talking about? What's the language they're using? It's not going to be consistent. Something's going to change. So we have to make sure that we continue to be educated in that way and just around our area of our area of expertise, if you will.
So I'm going to ask you this. Give me strategies for success for young athletes. And I'm talking high school, junior high. Can you give three key strategies? And if you have to break it up high school to junior high, that's okay, or three can cover all. What would they be?
So first thing first, what I would say would just be create a routine,
Mm,
create a level of routine. Because even now, being 33 years old, I still get lost on this, but I think everybody can benefit from this. If you find what works best for you, for instance, for me, I write down everything I need to do throughout the course of the day. I write it down on a traditional piece of paper, and I mark it off as I do it. If I get distracted, I get on Twitter, I get on TikTok. I'm like, wait, go back to what I'm doing. So first things first is create a routine or create a structure. In addition to that, audit who you're in relationship with. Identify who are these people who are surrounding you on a daily basis. If we have people that are surrounding us that are always cussing, that are always saying negative things, or they're just people who just weigh us down, you might want to assess if being around that individual is going to help you get you to your goal or be successful in achieving that. So create the routine, assess who we surround ourselves with. But then the other point, just to double down on what we've said before, is just the aspect of being a lifelong learner.
mm,
Taking
mm.
10 take, taking 30 minutes out of a day, 20 minutes out of a day, reading 10 pages in a book. Just 10 pages, write down a few sentences of what you've learned, and you'll just amaze yourself at how much you end up learning and how much information you end up retaining based on you reading those 10 pages a day. So those would be 3 things that I would say, and I think those apply from middle school all the way through college and even beyond to where I am now.
You're right. And those are 3 great strategies. Now, we're at that time of the show we call motivational moment, similar to the 2-minute warning in the NFL letting us know we're near the end of the show. Now, I want you to imagine you've been invited to a sports banquet and you're the keynote speaker. If you could give one motivational, inspirational message to the audience, what would that message be? Imagine you're at the mic, ready to speak. Congratulations and good luck.
I would say thank you so much for the opportunity, David. And then I would say everybody out there, my young leaders, my parents, whomever you are hearing this message, the time is now for you to start your own podcast. And the reason I say start your own podcast is because Warren Buffett says the fastest way to instantly increase your net worth by 50% is through verbal and written communication. So understanding if he's a billionaire and he tells us this, then this is a way that we could go about it. Starting a podcast allows an individual who is middle school through high school, college, wherever you may be, to begin to build credibility in a field or in an area to where now you're ultimately taking your followers, your fans with you, creating a tribe wherever you go. Then you can build a brand from it. Then you can monetize it. But at the end of the day, if they chose not to do any of those things, you still walk away with soft skills being honed. You still walk away understanding how to effectively communicate. You walk away with a little bit of marketing and a few other things, but ultimately it sets you up for career readiness in whatever phase of life you're transferring to.
That's an awesome motivational moment. And we wouldn't be connected now if it wasn't for podcasts, right?
Exactly.
So how can our audience reach you? On what media platforms can they connect with you on?
So on all of the platforms, you can type in Jonathan Jones Speaks or Jonathan J Speaks, and you'll find me. My website is jonathanjonespeaks.com. And I would encourage people, if they're listening, they're on Instagram, send me a DM. Let me know what you heard that was beneficial. And I'm always open to connect and certainly always open to answer any questions, because I want to definitely advocate for our student leaders and, provide them any insight I can to help to get them from wherever they are to transition successfully to the next phase of their lives.
And tell them about your books again, the ebooks, and let them know about TED Talks too, so they can see you on TED Talks.
Certainly.
Yeah.
So the first TED Talk I did was talking about the power of commitment, where David was just sharing, where I talked about a few of the experiences I had with, wanting to be a fireman and a hockey player and a few other things. I'll let you all check that out. But that was the first TED Talk. The second one I did was called The Pain of an Untold Story, where I encourage people to share their pain. I encourage people to share their story, because I believe it really can impact and serve and support people at a high level there. And in regards to my books, I wrote a best-selling book. It's entitled Process, 14 Surprisingly Simple Behaviors to Skyrocket Millennials to Success. Although the principles are universal. But that book you can grab on my website. It's jonathanjonespeaks.com. And ultimately, it's tangible self-help strategies, self-reflection manual, I basically call it, because it allows opportunity to engage with the questions, and it's an easy read from just the feedback I've received. And the latest book I've written is just geared towards student athlete development. So if you're a parent, if you're a coach, or if you're any individual who serves and supports these young leaders, it's just basically 7 ways to further serve and support them, to help prepare them to go from college to career readiness. And, I have that available for free. That's on my website as well. So that's me, and jonathanjonespeaks.com once again, and always looking to, inspire and add value to any student athletes. Thank you, David.
And thanks again for coming to Network Nation today. Everyone, our site is under construction. Be ready. We got a lot of new things coming, a lot of work we're putting into it. We're excited for product, services, and networking with people just like Jonathan here. So thanks again for coming to Network Nation.
Excellent. Thank you so much, David. I appreciate the opportunity.